Hello, TNA fam. How's it going for today? We are back at the Impact Zone podcast again to talk more TNA wrestling shenanigans. And today I want to talk about fans living in the past. I think nostalgia is a hell of a drug. Rick James, baby. It's a hell of a drug. But it is, honestly. It really is. Nostalgia is a hell of a drug, and we've found that out a long time ago, really. But it's one of those funny things. I think this could be a spicy take in some circles, I suppose, or whatever. But I think TNA, in some ways, just in some ways, is actually more enjoyable and somewhat better than what WWE is. Just in some areas, not in all areas, obviously. But the problem I think that TNA has is not that it's quote unquote not appealing or whatever. Again, I think their biggest problem is that a lot of fans still have this perception of TNA from like over 6, 7, maybe even 10 years ago. When the company was on its, downward spiral and what have you. People are still like the TNA lol fam, like those people out there wanting to just like kick it in the shins at every turn. And then it is one of those things of, well, AEW is much bigger kicking target these days or whatnot for people to be, pointing their finger and whatnot and saying, ha ha ha, or whatever. And that's not cool neither, but, you know, um, I think that again, still people want to kick rocks per se at TNA as well, and I don't really understand why. Because like it's some of these people that are complaining that for the last 20 something years that there's been no competition and whatnot, but yet you're being like, oh, we want the only sort of semi relevant competition to go out of business, um the fuck? What the fuck? Like, not to say that it's perfect and criticism is perfectly valid, but when you're just like, oh, well, we don't have anything else to talk about, we might as well talk about the same fucking shit that we've been talking about for the last, like, 10 years. And that's how you know that you're, like, a boomer wrestler take, like, oh, TNA did a shit thing in 2012 that we've talked about 3 million times. Like, yes, they did this shit thing, or they did that thing, or whatever. WWE did some shit things around that time too. A lot of fucking shit things. And how much are you preaching on about, oh, WWE did this and da 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 did that and whatever else, all this other stuff, and whatnot. So that's like, as I said, like again, nostalgia can work positively and negatively, I guess, as well in some ways, or perception or whatever, or just like people living in the past of, things like it's crazy because like people very easily and quickly forgot that WWE was in a huge slump after like what 92 maybe, I don't know, like 94, 95 were really bad years. Like at least 95 was a really bad year. 96 was still a pretty bad year. But then when like late 97 came along, people forgot all about it because all of a sudden things are starting to click, and Stone Cold's on the rise, and then you had DX and all of this other stuff. You had all these other things starting to click. You had heel Brett and whatnot. You had all the greats that were there, Taker and whatnot, and Kane and all this sort of stuff coming along. And I think people like to remember like the WWE or the mainstream narrative of things. This is something that I keep finding with a lot of people. They don't delve into anything for themselves, or don't go out of their way to look things up. And yes, you buy box office or buy ticket attendance or buy whatever. And the fact, yes, they had to, let people into arenas for free because no one was coming to pay, because the product wasn't that hot at the time, but whatever. But it was also a factor of, a lot of those events happening at Universal Studios, and hey, they couldn't charge tickets for within the Universal Studios, so they always had to let people in there for free when it was at those studios. But it was a very accessible, and they got some amount of money or whatever it was out of that deal, and then that deal fell through somewhere, I think, as well. So yeah, but I think a lot of people have, that mentality that TNA is still back in those days, of crawling, and really we're not far away from that era, but that era is so long ago as well. Like it's so weird, and all wrestling companies go through these ups and down phases, especially if you've been in the business for more than a hot minute. And that's what AEW is going through right now. They're just going through a lull spell, and people don't realize that. You could, like, yes, they could do things better, but you got to cut them some slack too. The thing is, this happens to every business, and it's only the really hardcore people that will stick through, and then eventually at some point they will, turn things around and things will get better, and people will be like, oh man, they're on fire suddenly, and they'll be all back on the train like nothing happened, like, yeah, it's crazy. I think sometimes things are only as popular as they're perceived to be as popular as, if you know what I mean. So if we started saying TNA, like, or New Japan or AEW or whatever was the best, and people kind of felt like that perception was true in some ways, because you've actually got to have that feeling of, oh yeah, it's kind of true, or whatever, then, because all my friends and all my family and all the people that I know are talking about this, or, what have you, or there's all this hype around it and whatnot, then it seems to be real. That's what I mean. Like, so that's the problem, I think. The problem is the PR, and I've said this millions of times, but again, perception is reality, unfortunately. So no matter how good they're doing, until they, are literally in your face with success, like, sort of thing, it's like, oh yeah, they're still shit, or whatever else it is, blah blah blah. So that's the problem as well. So yeah, no, but like, I think a lot of people remember the Attitude Era as being amazing. Now, I'm not saying that it was bad, but it's actually not as good as what I think a lot of people remember. There's a lot of dregs in amongst that era, and people look back at it with rose-tinted glasses, just remembering the few good bits, and whatnot. And like all the stuff that they did back then, isn't going to work now, really, because the audience has shifted along, has moved along from, that kind of thing, especially a lot of the, gender roles, or whatever you want to call it, the stereotypical role for women in that era, where it was just, well, for the most part, like, you had a few wrestlers, but they were all expected to be, bra and panties matches and whatnot, and all of that sort of stuff and whatnot. So, and 3-minute matches and whatnot, and all of that sort of stuff and whatnot. Even like when you have your, like, Survivor Series matches, oh, well, you're only getting a few minutes or whatever else it is. So everyone's just got to get pinned with a quick roll-ups, and that's pretty much it. Match over. See yous, bye. And just, like, little to no thought put into, like, storylines or angles or whatever have you, unless it was, like, something, insert sexual something or other, like, like, you've got to be somebody's girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever, in some relationship with somebody. Otherwise, it doesn't matter, you've got to be teaming with The Rock or dating The Rock or whoever for us to be like paying attention to you. So, and it was only like guys like The Rock and that it was like, hey, we'd like to work with some of these gals or whatever, that actually brought them to a certain level and made them feel like, oh man, you know, especially early on, when they weren't well known, they could have blended into the background at anywhere. So, but yeah, guys, yeah, I think wrestling fans, especially the more casual wrestling fans, are, hopped up on the member berries, and they don't really realize where the company is at and whatnot. And again, like we're not at the best position, at all, but still, like, we're way away from where we were. We're still on the road and still trying to climb that ladder a bit more, obviously, and still trying to, do as best as what they can. So hopefully they can continue to do that. But we're going to have to continue to, inform people. No, it's not like it was, back then. That was, over a decade ago or whatever it was, at this point. And they're like, oh man, I'm old, whatever. But yeah, guys, anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this one. It's a bit short, but whatever. Hope you have enjoyed anyway, and I hope you will join me again in another one.